My name is Denise Augusto, and I am the director of the Library and Information Science program at Drexel. In fact, this is me on this slide. I am your host for today. Let's see, what can I tell you? Drexel Library Information Science Master's Program, a master's program that we've had with its origins. Actually, in 1892 at Drexel, we've had library science and now library and information science education for, what is that? Well over 130 years. Well, today we're going to have me as your host, going to tell you a little bit about our capstone requirement for our library and information science master's degree. And thank you in advance to our two student presenters. We have Jaden Yoshikawa, who just graduated. So everybody, yes, very excited. Oh yes, I can see you guys clapping. That's wonderful, exciting. And Katie O'Hara Krebs, who is super close to graduating. So also golf clap, golf clap, golf clap. And in fact, most of the time we have students who are talking about capstone students. They're students near the end of their academic programs because the capstone project we intend to have near the end of the academic program. Also, I thought I saw her. I see Dr. Heather Williver-Farr, who we give a big thank you for, because she is the professor who mentored our students today. She did all the work. I'm just hosting the webinar, but she and the students, I see her saying no. She and the students did all the work. So I wanted to give a big thank you, Heather. Thank you. Okay, oopsie. All right, so what is a capstone project? Well, at least at Drexel, a capstone project is a culminating project at the end of a Master's of Library and Information Science. And we also have it, in fact, as a requirement for other masters in our college as well. Students complete their capstone projects as a part of a course that we call Info 890 Capstone Course. Very creative name. And it's done with a Drexel instructor. In this case, it was Dr. Heather Williver-Farr, who was the person who taught this course. Students work on a capstone project in an outside organization, most commonly libraries, museums, archives, nonprofits, schools, universities, and other organizations, the kind of place that they want to work once they graduate. And they can apply to organizations. Was me. They can apply to organizations for capstone projects, or because we have organizations who contact us saying, I would like 2 capstone students to work on such and such project, and we keep a database of places that contact us, or they can design their own projects. Most students tend to design their own projects, but some people do go with projects that we've lined up as well. And work can be in person or virtual or a combination. And the capstone requirement is actually 2 quarters. Each quarter is 10 weeks long, and students work an average of 10 hours per week over 2 academic quarters. So typically 10 hours for 10 weeks times 2 is 200 hours of work on a capstone project. Anybody have questions or ideas about the capstone requirement? You guys are so shy and quiet and polite. Okay, all right, let's see. Then this is, if you know me, this is totally an excuse to show a picture of a dog. Yes, this is one of our 3 Drexel therapy dogs. I can't remember what breed they are, but look at those ridiculous jowls. Aren't you in love? Oh, I thought someone was telling me the breed there. Okay, if you have comments or questions, or you know what kind of breed this is, please put it in the chat. Okay, so the organizations, typically museums, libraries, archives, or nonprofits, provide a project supervisor to offer guidance for students as they work on their projects. And Jane Gruberg says, we need metadata for this dog, please. Yes, we do. Oh, it's a Mastiff. Oh, it's beautiful. Neapolitan Mastiff. Wow. I haven't even heard of that one. Okay. And after identifying a project, each student has to propose what they want to get out of this project, what they want to learn from it. And we structure the proposals with project learning outcomes, really what the student wants to learn from the project. Project milestones, what they want to achieve during those 10 weeks or 20 weeks working on the project, and success metrics. How are you going to know at the end of the project whether your project was a success? And I can say, working with students typically write really big learning outcomes, really big project milestones, and really big success metrics. And so then we go back several times during the project to reevaluate, reassess, and reflect. And almost always that also means winnowing down to really getting to the core of the project, because projects end up taking longer and being more involved than most people enthusiastically propose in the beginning. But the idea is we return several times to these learning outcomes, project milestones, and success metrics to reflect on with the course instructor and with other students working on their capstones. How is my project going? What am I learning? And what am I contributing to the organization? And for anybody who might be interested in having capstone students in your organization, I want to make clear that course grades are based on the discussion and reflection assignments and graded by the course instructor. So the supervisor in the organization isn't doing grading and assessment work. Okay, we're going to say goodbye to how do you say it? Chai. A mastiff. Let's see. And last, I just wanted to say why we didn't want to do this. What are the project benefits? Benefits for students: gain professional work experience. And in fact, that's really one of the two main reasons that we started the capstone requirement in 2017, based on surveys of graduating students and employers, people who hired our students. We got lots of positive feedback on the program, and a lot of students and employers who said, gee, I wish we had some actual experience working in organizations. So that was one of the two driving factors behind the capstone project. And the other one was to put concept learned into the master's program into practice. So all those things we talk about in the classroom and all that stuff we make you read, you can actually see how to apply it in an environment. And benefits for employers: we're always looking for people who want to supervise capstone projects. Low cost assistance on special projects. Enhance your public relations. It looks good to be supervising students. And find future employees. We have actually a fair number of students who have transitioned from their capstone projects into continuing projects or even jobs. Oh, I guess I have one more slide, last one. If you'd like to submit requests for capstone students, we have a form online to submit requests that we review, or also super easy is you can always just email me, Denise Augusto, DEA22@drexel.edu. Okay, now we get to hear the good part. We get to actually talk to our students. Before we do that, does anybody have comments, questions, ideas, or does anyone want to continue to drool over the mastiff? Drexel's just getting a fourth one. We have 3 therapy dogs, and there's a new one who's a puppy. He's like 4 or 5 months old, so he's just training to be a therapy dog. Okay, but wait, back to the topic. All right, so very generously, we have 2 students who have agreed just to chat and talk to us about what their capstone projects were, how they found them, and I don't know, good parts, bad parts, what they learned, whatever they want to tell us. So first we have Jaden Yoshikawa, and I'm going to mute.
Hi, everybody. I am Jaden Yoshikawa. I just graduated last month with my master's in library and information science. And I did my capstone project with the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, specifically the archive there. When I started brainstorming what I wanted to do for my capstone, I was specifically looking at the assignments from all of my courses where we were told to interview people from information organizations and seeing who I liked interviewing, who I potentially wanted to reach out to again. And because I had a few interviews to do in the quarter before my capstone quarter, I was adding that to my interviews, asking them, do you have any internships available? Would you be willing to work on a capstone project with me? And in one of my interviews, I was interviewing Amanda Peters, who is the archivist at the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh. And I said, do you have any opportunities like this? Would you be willing to work with me? And she said, you know what, I don't have anything like that, but email me after we get off this call and keep bugging me about it for weeks. And I did. I kept saying, hey, just checking in. Is this something you're still interested in? And behind the scenes, she actually went ahead and created an entire internship program, had it approved by her supervisors, and reached out to me and said, okay, we want you here. Whatever you want to do, let's do it. And so we came up with a plan together on what I would be doing there. And ultimately, she decided I would be processing one of her backlogged collections at the archive, everything from acquisition to uploading it to archive space, and also digitizing the collection on the side. So ultimately, the goal of the entire project was to have everything uploaded to archive space at the end and a portion of it digitized. Nobody had touched the collection yet. So initially when we started, they thought they had about 1,000 postcards, maybe a little bit under that. As I started working on it, one of the quickest setbacks we had was that there were actually about 4,000. And I had chosen to transcribe the collection because I had some previous transcription work. And so that was also lengthening the project pretty significantly. I did end up able to process all 4,000 with transcriptions and have them uploaded into archive space. But our second setback that we hit was digitizing the collection, because we were scanning the postcards front and back, which takes about 3 minutes per postcard. And I had chosen a portion of it that was about 200 postcards altogether. So it was about 10 hours worth of scanning, which I actually completed last week, well after the end of my project. I will say that's probably one of my biggest points that I want to make, is that it's okay if you don't finish it. And it's okay to keep continuing to do the work afterwards, because I was very passionate about the project. I know that they don't have the time to continue working on it without another intern. So I wanted to volunteer my time to keep going back in and help them finish that. I also did the metadata this week. But the project itself was a lot of fun. I got to meet so many people. I wasn't just working with the archive, I was also working with everyone. They included me in the weekly meetings that we had. I also got to take a peek into their preservation department. They taught me how to rebind books and do a lot of that. I will mention I did my capstone in tandem with an independent study. So I was working 20 hours a week for the 10 weeks instead of the 10 hours a week, which also contributed to me being able to finish the project that I had set out to do. Because if I had only been doing 10 hours, I don't think this project would have been anywhere near finished. But we do have a completed finding aid, which was incredible, and it's available to the public now. And soon, now that I have the metadata finished, we should have that 200 postcards available to view online. It is titled the Pennsylvania Postcard Collection at the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, if you want to look into that. They did offer me just an incredible amount of opportunity while I was there. They also had me write like a blog post for their blog as well, mentioning the work that I did, what I enjoyed about it. So I've also written that for them. But overall, it was a really enriching experience. I didn't expect to learn as much as I did, but I felt like it was also a very validating experience, because I got to put to practice everything that I'd learned over and over again. And I also got to have trial and error. We had a lot of postcards that had some sensitive material in them. I had to figure out a good content warning statement and figure out, how I wanted to organize things, which changed, I swear, daily. Because there were so many different kinds of postcards. They were international, they were all from all over the US, they were of all different subjects. And also the content of them varied completely. Some of them talked about building rockets, and some of them talked about how their vacation was going and what they ate that day. So the subject matter was very different. In the end, I did split it up into 15 series based on donors, because that was just the easiest way to have the collection done. And especially because the transcription work was so vital to it, I didn't want to split up the stories that were told in each of those collections. So kept it to the 15. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the entire experience, and yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yay, excellent, fantastic. we agreed that we were going to have both presentations first and take questions afterward. So if you have questions, keep them in mind. Don't forget your questions. Also, I hope I put the right link in the chat so that you can look at the postcard collection. Did I get it right? We'll see. Jaden will check. Okay. So Katie, hi.
Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to be here and see some faces and see some names on the screen that I have been able to meet and be in class with over the past 2 years. Similar to Jaden, it was finding the capstone. I remember when I started Drexel my first quarter, the first instructor asked me, what do you think you're going to do for your capstone? And at that point, I remember having one of those moments where I was like, well, I don't even know. I can't even think that far into the future. But my background for the past 6 years, I have been a substitute librarian in the elementary schools in my district. So I come from a more school library background. And one of the reasons I thought I was going to do this is just to make my in my place in the elementary school library, like official, like I have my library science degree now. But along this path, I have learned that I actually love metadata and I love the innovation and all the collaborative work that is being done in academic institutions. So, so when I finally did come around and I could see the capstone, when I could see the capstone, terms coming up, I actually used some of my personal connections in the community. I am also a writer in my community, and Penn State has a program called Poems from Life where they invite writers in the community to meet with people in the retirement communities in our area, and they get to know one another, and then the other person writes a poem about their life. And I've participated in that event through the university libraries a number of times. So I had some connections there. Also, the elementary libraries we'd done our own diversity, equity, and inclusion audits on our collections in our State College area school district libraries. So that was very much on my mind. So I basically went knocking on all the doors I knew at Penn State in the library department and just reintroduced myself and reminded them. They're like, oh, yes, you're a school librarian. I was like, yes, but I want to be an academic librarian. And told them about what I had done, a DEI audit in our elementary libraries. Also, just told them of my interest in moving to the academic library. And after a few phone calls and visits on campus, I was able to identify 2 different people in the institution who said, well, unlike Jaden, my capstone, I didn't do the same thing for 2 quarters. I did 2 different ones. Both were done at Penn State's University Park campus libraries. The first one I worked in the library learning services department, and I developed and implemented a DEI audit on the leisure reading collection at the University Park campus. And also, like Jaden, I went in there and I was like, I'm going to audit all 6,000 to 9,000, titles in this in this library, in this collection. And I quickly realized that 10 weeks is not a full semester, and I had to to pull back a little bit. But luckily, due to the supervisor I had, the interim head of the library learning services department, I came to her. She was like, well, how do you want to approach this? I said, well, instead of 6,000 titles, I think I can get through about 1,200 titles in the 10 weeks. So I used Library of Congress call numbers to really determine the voices in the collections. I looked at arts, I looked in memoirs and things like that. So we could really highlight the voices that were in these collections. I then got a chance to work with the assessment department at the library and worked with them on their data digest, where they broke down information about who uses the libraries and all different types of diversity, equity, and inclusion standards that the library has currently. And I was able then to, once I finished auditing all of those, it was a time-consuming and very much data entry for most of it, but it was really interesting to go through these 1,200 titles and find out really, at least in this portion of the collection, what is the Penn State Leisure Reading Collection? Is it representative of the communities which it serves? So actually, just to give you a little insight, the findings were that it, in the portion of the collection that I was looking into, they do relatively match with the diversity of the Penn State University Park and World Campus. However, I then was making cases, and as collection development officers there at the library, were that regardless of if we're meeting expectations, should we just be meeting expectations as we look at the global, world and the citizen, and being good citizens and good, stewards of collections. So that was a great opportunity. It gave me a chance to work with quite a few different people in the university. And at that time, they were so lovely. They said, well, we could definitely find you something else to do here in library learning services, or you could do like another 1,200. You could do like find out the metadata on another 1,200 titles. But I was really interested in trying something else, just looking at academic librarianship from a different perspective. And I have a close mentor who she is the education librarian and one of the assistant directors of Pennsylvania Center for the Book. And so she has also was named the co-director for reference services at the Penn State University Libraries. For 10 years, there was no kind of unit overseeing how reference services was handled at the 22 campuses and the 36 libraries under their jurisdiction. So training and it was very haphazard. There's no really cohesive standards for training. Ask a Librarian. Over the past decade, they have seen a lot of reference librarians leave or burn out. No one wants to take Ask a Librarian shifts and things of that nature. So in this new department that was just started in January of 2023, they were charged with starting to bring things to kind of right the ship. They had met with all of the librarians on all of the campuses to just do informational interviews, and we're just trying to put some best practices in place and moving things forward. I was able to Ask a Librarian chat sessions. First, I completed all the training that a new reference librarian at Penn State at the University Park campus would undertake. And then I was able to, I manned a few Ask a Librarian sessions on my own. I did about 4 hours at the end of the quarter, which was intense. And I'm so glad that there are subject specialists, because there were some engineering questions that I was so happy that I knew. I'm like, oh, I don't even know if this is English that you're in this question you're asking me. I'm going to forward you straight to a subject specialist. But it really did give me some amazing insight in just this other perspective of libraries. And it really just supported what I knew, that academic libraries are a place I want to be. There's so many opportunities and so much exciting stuff happen. And the collaborative work and the way that they just are pushing like information and sharing those literacies with all the patrons and all the communities they serve. I do want to say that Penn State was Pennsylvania State University, it has no master's in library and information science, which I've been waiting for. I've been living in State College for 18 years waiting for them to do this. But everyone at the library was so excited that Drexel had a capstone as part of our program, because as I worked these past 6 months in that system, in the library system, they are constantly asked, apparently from other like Clarion University students who graduate and then say, oh, can I come and just volunteer at the library? But at Penn State, unless you're tied to a program or you get unless you have someone who is willing to sponsor and supervise you, you're not even allowed to come in and do volunteer work and see how the library works. So I think that so they were very complimentary that Drexel had this as part of the program, that we were really putting this like scholarship into action. Oh, and I almost forgot, just like Jaden, it doesn't always just end at the end of the capstone, because part of reference services at the end, we did get to work on the chatbot. Penn State on May 8th launched its first chatbot, not AI, it's rule-based, and the librarians, we've been going in on a weekly basis and making changes to workflows when answers to questions don't quite match up, but I got to learn and help build that through SpringShare, so that was incredibly not helpful. I know it's been great, and so my second supervisor on that and I are actually collecting data this summer and are writing a paper about this rule base as opposed to AI chatbots, since we're one of the first academic library to use the SpringShare platform to start this. So yeah, I'm just gathering data too and writing in my free time when I'm not doing everything else. So thank you for the time to tell you a little bit about my 2 different capstones.
Wow, 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 and wow. This is so exciting. And yeah. Oops, got somebody else coming in. It's really interesting that both of you mentioned the word metadata. I know I see Jane beaming in she's in the bottom square for me. This is actually something I see over and over and over in our students. They come in interested in something, and when they leave, part of their interest is metadata. I'm not sure if it's just unique to the Drexel program or maybe the power of the Metadata Research Center, but I really see this as a theme across all our students. So thank you guys so much, so much. Questions, comments, dog pictures? You guys, you can just unmute is probably the easiest and comment or ask questions.
So I'm a professor, but I'm also a practitioner, and I have not been teaching the capstone for very long. So thanks for your patience as I sort of try to master teaching this course. And but I have been inspired by so many of the students, capstone students, and the work that they're doing, and have actually begun to change some of my practices and my foci at my job, my day job. So I'm very thankful for the work you're doing. A lot of it's cutting edge and very progressive. I'm also really excited that you like metadata because, without metadata, nothing is accessible. So, and that's particularly true in the archives and special collections world, but it's true in terms of circulating and collections and electronic resources. So I'm really thankful, and maybe we're doing our jobs, Jane, right? And Denise, that we're introducing the importance of metadata in many courses. So I'm really impressed by both of your projects, and I think that you did an outstanding job, and you were very honest about the things that didn't work out and having to modify your milestones and your metrics. And I think that's an important part of the learning process. And doing a capstone is learning how to scope a project and how much time it takes. So, but the only way that you can do that and learn from that is to be honest about what you've achieved and not achieved. And both of you were very honest. So I really appreciate that. And I think inspired other students to be honest as well. Thank you so much for sharing what you've learned through the capstone with us. Really appreciate it.
I just have to say, Dr. Wilverfar, I also appreciate throughout the capstone, you were also reminded us that it was part of the learning experience. And my librarians that I worked with at Penn State University were the same way. There were days that I would go and work with my elementary librarian students, and then in the afternoon after 3, I would go then to the university library and be like, I should know how to do this all, because I did it, but Follett kind of really did it for me in the elementary library scope of when I worked on my DEI. But it was great to have this as part of the capstone, and part of the whole master's program, to remember that it is a learning experience, because I think that is something we feel like we're going into a library, so we should definitely know how to do the things we're doing. But, and just as other students come into the library and think they should know how to use all the information resources that are in there, like, we have to be willing to be beginners and to not know and to ask the questions too. So I appreciate that everyone, who already knew how to do it was very supportive in the learning process.
I had a very similar experience working at the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh. A lot of the people that I was working with, especially when I mentioned the volume that I was working with, like I said, they thought they had under 1,000 postcards. So when I went in, I think it was week 4, I said, well, I've processed about 2,000. I'm projecting there's about 2,000 more. They said, I didn't even know we had that many postcards. I hope you know nobody expects you to finish this. So it was very validating to have people in the profession saying, okay, we do not expect you to finish this in the timeline we originally had. And when I did actually finish it, they were very much like, okay, you're a robot. um, and they were like, but that's amazing. And please come back in if you want to, but if you don't, please don't, because we can't pay you for it. And we do not want to make you do unpaid work. So everyone was very nice about it. And I do think that is very important, of having that metric of how long things are going to take, and having people support you in that, by saying that, like, yes, this was unreasonable that we started with, and we're willing to work with you on expanding it. So.
And I think, what?
No, you go
for
ahead.
it. I'm
No,
just gonna
I
say, I
was-
think it's a really interesting idea that this is unpaid work. On the one hand, I'm kind of ethically opposed to unpaid work, but on the other hand, there is academic credit here, so I'm okay with that. When so often I get organizations writing me, they're really looking for unpaid work. And I will say, I don't think this is an ethical contribution to the profession, and we don't want to put the onus of the work on volunteers. So I think the capstone to me is definitely most of it is unpaid. Some people line up paying gigs, but it's in exchange for credit. So to me, I don't know if you guys agree, that kind of helps with the ethics of contributing to a profession. And I'm not sure about volunteering as much, but that's just something I was just thinking about last week when someone was calling me and asking basically for unpaid student work. Like, I don't think that's ethical. Okay, Katie, what were you going to say?
Well, I also want to speak to what you just said there too, because that I do understand that it came up a few times that people are like, are you being paid for this internship? Because they do have student workers in the library. Mostly at Penn State, they're undergraduate students who are work study students. So I was one of those unpaid students, but it really, I found that like just being in that space and meeting people and learning from them was far more valuable than actually any professional development that you would pay to take an ALA course or things like that, like a crash course in, reference training. In fact, actually Penn State was doing a crash course in reference training for all their ASCA librarians. And so then I was able to take part in that. And so any type of, professional development that was happening during my time there, I was able to take part in those things. So, I see that as an in-kind, kind of sponsorship in a way. But my only other thing that I wanted to share, and I think Jaden mentioned this too, is that it's just all of the librarians that I came in contact with were not only, just kind and understanding of, this is a learning experience, but they were so generous with their time and their talents. I think that I already believed this, but now, like, being part of this community, I feel like librarians, we take service to people very seriously. And in that respect, anyone who comes, and if you say you're a library student, you just want to, chat with someone, or you have questions, I think that remembering those personal, contacts is very important if you're looking for a capstone of your own making, and just, asking a librarian. I do not think that there are any librarians out there who are going to say, they might say no because they don't have time this week or today, but they're going to fit you in and at least, connect you with someone who might be able to help, I think. So.
And if there's anybody who's either in the session or watching it afterward, let me say, Key is starting early. I see Heather's getting excited. Yeah, a couple months ideally, just to get in, to meet people, to talk about your project ideas, and to have realistic expectations both on your side and the organization side. Key is conversation and starting early. Other ideas or contributions? You guys are so quiet.
Can I ask Jaden and Katie a question? I'm Megan. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Thank you. First of all, thanks so much. This is like super helpful. And I am just, your experiences sounds super interesting. And I also do appreciate like hearing that you started out thinking it was going to be this, and then you successfully completed this, and it's like satisfying, and it's yeah, that like learning how to scope things out is, I think, really challenging. I think I wanted to just ask if you could review, just state again, Jaden, you did the same you were at the same project, same organization for 2 terms of your capstone. And Katie, did you do 2 different capstones at the same time in the same quarter? Is that accurate?
So I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did my capstone in tandem with an independent study, and my independent study covered the second half of my capstone. So I did do all of mine in 1 quarter.
Okay.
So it was, yeah, it was all in 1 quarter. That's why it was the 20 hours a week for the 10 weeks.
And can you explain the component of like, how come something, is it because you can't do 2, you couldn't have worked 20 hours a week and completed 2 capstones at this project? Is it so you were able to take an independent study and
Yes.
that, okay, thanks.
Yes.
Let me explain that one.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
When we set up the curriculum, we sent to the university catalog 15 courses, 3 credits each. And then the capstone was so successful, after 1 quarter with 3 credits, we increased it to 6 credits. But the university rules say you couldn't take this course for more than 3 credits in 1 term. So we were just, for anybody who wanted to take it all in 1 turn, we did an independent study plus the capstone course. But starting in fall, right, next month, we were able to change the catalog so you can take the capstone course for up to 6 quarters per term. It was just one of those university rules, technical things. But now we found so many people who actually wanted to do double in 1 term. We did change the catalog. So.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you so much. And thanks
Sure.
again for sharing your experiences. They're really inspiring, and I'm getting excited. So thanks.
And Katie, you want to explain?
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I did mine across the winter and the spring term. I did them all at the Penn State University's University Park campus, but I did them and then I also just took another course in both of those terms. So I didn't do them 6. I had 6 credits in both of those terms that I was doing capstone, but the capstone was only 3 of those both times. So for my schedule and for the way, families work, that was easier for me.
And Katie, did you do 2 separate projects each quarter, or 1 separate project each quarter?
Yes, I did. Yes, I didn't continue my DEI audit. I found it very interesting, and I loved doing that work. But I wanted to also have the opportunity to just see a different area of academic librarianship while I was there. So.
I guess my follow-up question, and Megan, thank you for asking yours too, because now my mind is really spinning about whether to take it over 1 quarter or over 2. How would the project be different if you were to take it for 6 credits in 1 quarter? What expectations would be different, or what deliverables would be different too? That's probably for any of our professors.
Well, obviously, you're going to do more. If you're going to do a project, and many students do this, many students do a single project, but they break it up into different parts so that they can do it across 2 terms. You have to, in the past, you had to actually submit 2 different project proposals. So you would have to break up that work into 2 different proposals. That is commonly done, probably most commonly done. We've supported students who wanted and had the opportunity to do 20 hours a week at that site with an independent study, and as well as taking the capstone course. So that was really, but that was really only one proposal. I didn't ask for two, because I know the nature of the projects. I really think, honestly, it comes down to what works for you best, in terms of you have another job, if you have family, whatever the commitments that you have may dictate whether you want to do it in 2 quarters or 1. And then also really important to note is the site. You know, some sites are happy to have you 20 hours a week. Some sites are like, oh, that's a lot, right? That's a lot of time. I can afford 10 hours a week over 2 terms, but I can't do 20 hours a week for 10 weeks. That can be a lot for a lot of institutions. So I think that would drive it as well. And if you find a site you really want to work there, they may dictate, you know, how many hours you can spend.
And I am a school librarian in my current job as well. Am I able to do something that is in my current building, but not, I mean, obviously I wouldn't do something I already do.
Yes, most
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
That happens a lot. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to that? Hopefully I covered.
Well, absolutely, you do a job in your school. We just ask that specific project that has learning objectives, milestones, and success metrics. And also, as for timing, the intent is for students to work on their capstones at or near the end of the program. But if you're early in your program and some kind of good opportunity comes up, please take it. We will accommodate. You can take the capstone earlier. Don't miss out on a good opportunity.
Particularly a paid opportunity.
Oh, heck yeah.
Can I ask another question? I don't want to be the hog.
No, go for it.
Okay, thanks so much. You mentioned I think of a portal or like a place where people post you know, capstones. Can I just confirm if I have access to that or not?
Absolutely. While someone else talks, I will look for the link here.
Thanks so much. That's
Sure.
really helpful.
Does anyone have other questions? I will say that there are a number of opportunities listed in the portal, but it's also the case that many students reach out to local libraries and other types of institutions. It doesn't just have to be a library, and are able to secure their internships that way. I stress, though, it doesn't have to be like a formal internship. I think this is a stumbling block because in many cases, like for example, I've supported in my previous positions a Clarion student, and the internship had there was a lot of paperwork, there was a lot of reporting requirements. And so places may imagine that the internship is something that's more work on their end, and it is not. So you might want to approach and say, hey, I would like to volunteer. Now, in some cases, it may not work. Thank you for sharing that, Katie, about the Penn State libraries. But in many cases, if you reach out, what kind of volunteer needs do you have? And then that's your kind of entry. You meet with them and say, hey, I'm a capstone student, and would you mind sponsoring me? They're to sponsor, right? And their main duty is just to supervise you, but they never report back, right? So I think it's important to approach the institution carefully. And not scare them and not ask, do you have like a formal internship program? For example, LaSalle, I do host capstone students as well. And that's my day job. I work at LaSalle University. We didn't have any kind of internships at all, right? So I approached our HR department about sort of at first volunteer work, but then when it turns out it was going to be a credit, it actually turned into something more formal. So that was fine. But in some cases, and many like public libraries, that isn't going to be the case. I mention this though, because sometimes if you wait too long, the institution may be very willing to support you in this work, in this project, but they're going to need to get approvals if they don't already have something set up. And so it can take some time. So it's really important to approach the institutions a bit earlier than, like a month out from the capstone. But again, I would be really careful in how I approach the site about I would definitely mention the term volunteer work, right? At first to kind of get your foot in the door, and then you can talk about maybe, and you can bring some ideas too, but often the libraries will have some needs, and then maybe you can like put your own spin on it. Maybe they have collection development needs, but maybe you suggest you do an audit, a diversity audit. But really sort of trying to meet their needs, their volunteer needs is probably the best way to get your foot in the door.
I have to say I concur with that. I don't really have a lot of experience in this field, and it's worrying to me. So I've been trying to get a lot of internships. None of those have panned out. So I just started asking about volunteering. And luckily somebody got back to me. I started volunteering somewhere recently, and it looks like I might turn into something that I'm interested in. Luckily I think I'm going to take the capstone next term, so I have some time. But yeah, volunteering looks like it might lead to that for me, and I think I would have hit a wall if I didn't try that. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. Yay. Maybe we should be using the term volunteer, because like Heather said, most of our students don't apply and get formal internships. It's mostly going and talking to people like both Jaden and Katie did, and saying what would work for the organization and what would work for me. So maybe volunteering is a better term. I'm looking at the open positions portal we have right now. I see 3 currently. There's one for children's librarian, one for project coordinator. Those I think are both paid jobs. And then William Penn Charter School is looking for a library student in a capstone. And the positions in that Blackboard portal, if you don't have access, just email iHelp and ask them to give you access. But they're over the transom, so some of them are great. We try to weed out the ones that look like they're inappropriate, but also some of them have been in there a really long time, and we don't know if they've been used, if they've been taken, and if there's already a student. I'm currently working with 2 organizations to set up ongoing, I should say volunteer, but capstone projects. One is WEPAC West. Anybody remember what it stands for? It's an organization in Philadelphia, because, in Philadelphia, we have, I think it's 140,000 public school students and 4 school librarians. In essence, there are no school librarians in Philadelphia. So we're working with this organization that works trying to put volunteers in school libraries, which again, the ethical questions come up. But in this case, since there is no chance that the school system will pay for trained librarians, we are working with WEPAC to set up an ongoing volunteer capstone internship so that we can put some of our students working in these organizations. And the other one I'm working with, and we plan to open up in September, is the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project, which is a grant-funded project and archives that has to do with all of the hate crime, murders, and lynchings in Maryland as a public education project. So these are 2 that we're working on. They're in the pike. We're still working out the capstone position ads. When I get them, I always send everything to the student email list, but they also do appear in the Blackboard portal. That said, though, the way Andrew went about it in a lot of ways is the best way to do this, to start talking to people and use the framework of volunteer. And remember that you can get credit because you're taking as a capstone course. It's volunteer, but you're also getting academic credit. Or as Katie said, learning. We don't want to forget the learning part, of course. Let's see. Other questions or comments? Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you, Jaden. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Heather. And thank you, everybody else. And I'm going to try to do this every few months, at the very least, just so we can get to see each other and say hi. Okay.
Thank you so
Denise.
much.